Hey guys, I'm Slave to the Games. This is the next part to Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 in-depth explanation series, and by that I mean everything, like the literal full in-depth explanation. This time we're going to be going over the VENTRUE clan, so if you guys stick with me, we're going to go through the White Wolf Wikipedia or fandom that I've been using for most and nearly all of the information I've gotten when it comes to regarding clans itself, and once again, as I've done with in all the previous videos, I'm going to give them another shout out, and I'm going to keep this going for as long as I use it for these clan informational videos. And without further ado, let's get started. The VENTRUE are one of the 13 clans of Kindred in Vampire the Masquerade, or, well, the vampire storyline. The VENTRUE has long been one of the proudest lines of vampires. Its members work hard to maintain a reputation for honor, genteel behavior, and leadership. A sense of noblesse oblige has long pervaded the clan, accompanied by the genuine belief that the VENTRUE know what is best for everyone. They not only consider themselves the oldest clan, but see themselves as the enforcers of tradition and the rightful leaders of kindred society. They have long been embraced from the ranks of nobility and privilege, whether kings or merchant princes, but they have also been known as knights and warlords who sought to live by the laws of chivalry and duty. If anything, the VENTRUE have adapted to fill the roles of leadership over the ages, and in the final nights are more politician than noble warrior, or CEO than baron lord. They remain the largest supporters of the Camarilla and the Masquerade, believing both institutions to be the surest means of protecting vampires from the growing mortal masses, and of guarding their own power. The VENTRUE cherish history more so than any other clan, believing it to be a worthy guide to live by and to justify their positions of authority today. This is not to say that they have any particular obsession with the truth. A myth can be much more powerful than the real thing after all, but they take history very seriously, a fact that is no doubt aided by their tale being one of conquests and grand achievements, likes of which few other clans can boast. To hear them say it, their claim to fame begins in the early days of vampire history, with Cain himself commanding his eldest child, Enosh, to embrace the VENTRUE founder, who they believed to be the first member of the third generation and who was often called VENTRUE. He was to be Cain's advisor in the Knights of the First City, and when the Darkfather prepared to leave, he chose to hand the burden of the stewarding of his people to VENTRUE. Through this story, the VENTRUE justified their position of superiority and leadership over the other clans, just as they believed their progenitor led the other antediluvians for a time. The first major achievements of the VENTRUE is attributed to Artemis, with the creation of militant Sparta. Wary of the mortal masses even in those ancient nights, Artemis saw promise in the ideas of the philosopher Lycurgus and supported him, seeking to make the humans a tool to be used rather than fought, and eventually making herself Sparta's patron goddess. It would soon become the perfect example, mortal potential in her eyes. Loyal, brave, and completely devoted to self-perfection. Sensing the rising power, other VENTRUE gathered to become a part of the Spartan war machine, urging the neighboring city-states to ally with Sparta while establishing their own domains within the Peloponnesian League. This also made possible the rise of the mercantile city of Corinth and its prince Evarchus, who exemplified the power of wealth and a role for all VENTRUE to follow. The growing power of Sparta and the Brujah alliance in Athens would lead to the First Brujah War, a conflict that would set the stage for a bitter rivalry between the two clans millennia afterwards. Though the Brujah or VENTRUE never came directly to blows in the conflict, the eventual invasion of Athens, led by Lysander, caused many Brujah and Tordor to regard the VENTRUE as power-mad barbarians, while Spartan VENTRUE considered the Brujah dangerous idealists. After Sparta's fall, the rise of Rome signaled one of the clan's greatest ages. Many VENTRUE had long settled in the region and lived relatively quietly while it was ruled by the Etruscans. Nevertheless, the rebellion that freed the Roman people was attributed to Colat, who would become the city's first prince. Recognizing the mortals of Rome to be a proud and superstitious people that would sooner stake any vampire than consider living with them, let alone beneath them, Colat did not seek to rule the Romans directly or make himself a deity, as vampires in the past had done, but influenced events from behind the scenes by collecting favors from the city's citizens. This system would later be refined by Camilla, child of Colat, who replaced his sire and set about establishing political connections with the patrician families of Rome. Instead of using disciplines to force his will on the city's leaders, Colat ruled through ghoul proxies, delivering favors and contacts, allowing him to grow rich and powerful while the mortals remained ignorant. This strategy would be widely adopted in the centuries to follow and would serve the clan well once the Masquerade was adopted. The Second Brujah War would parallel that of Rome and Carthage, where Brujah, Assamites, and even Bali ruled the mortals openly, demanding blood and sacrifices while living as gods. In such contrast to what the patricians had fostered in Rome, the African nation was seen as a den of infernalists and monsters. Despite Lysander's repeated efforts to convince Camilla, the war with Carthage would not begin until a Brujah Bruja named Dominic antagonized the Malkavian prince of Syracuse, Alcaius. Alcaius turned to Artemis and supposedly the bold dancer Erikel for help, and the three made plans with Lysander to arrange the war. Canaanites largely avoided direct fighting during the first two Punic Wars, but in the final assault, Ventrue, Tordor, Malkavians, and Gangrel of Rome battled openly alongside the Romans against the people of Carthage. In the end, both sides were greatly wounded, but the Ventrue prevailed, and the Bruja would never forgive them for destroying their fabled city. In the years that followed, Rome prospered. The Ventrue shared its power with many of the other clans that had taken part in the wars against Carthage, establishing friendships with other Canaanites even as the Ventrue themselves began squabbling with one another. Most patricians of the time were independent, with the only organization of the clan being a largely ineffective assembly that eventually fell out of practice. Following the cue of Julius Caesar, Camilla reorganized the Ventrue into a structure that gave authority over the clan's members to the most important Ventrue in the region. While the power over the younger and less important Ventrue was not absolute, it did create a means for settling disputes, establishing connections, and identifying friends and enemies of the clan. These reforms served the clan well, and the patricians prospered for several centuries until the empire itself dissolved. When Rome fell, most of the Ventrue elite abandoned the ruined city to establish new centers of power elsewhere. During the rise of the Merovingian dynasty in Francia, later the Holy Roman Empire, the Ventrue began infiltrating existing government as feudal lords, thus taking credit for the creation and expansion of the medieval feudal system. As the Frankish state expanded into Germany and Italy, the Ventrue began to prosper once again. When the Holy Roman Empire was dispersed, the Ventrue moved their center of power to Italy. However, since Rome was dominated by the Lasambra, as much was the church, the Ventrue established centers of power elsewhere in Italy, in Venice, Milan, Genoa, and Firenze. Here, the Ventrue constantly opposed the Lasambra and their proxies in the church and in Rome, in their quest for power, as their own early efforts had not succeeded. Posing as kings and merchant princes, the Ventrue expanded their influence across the Mediterranean through trade routes and crusade, thus becoming again a force to be reckoned with. During these times, many Ventrue were influenced by the laws of chivalry and personal honor. Some of these separated themselves from the main clan during the founding of the Camarilla and turned to the savage. 1800s England was a good time to be Ventrue. The combination of centuries-old feudalism with the nouveau riche middle class served to keep the Ventrue at the top of the power structure. From there, they could oversee both international politics and the finances of an entire country. Many Ventrue children, already hungry for territories of their own, were sent to the colonies through the British Empire, creating Camarilla beachheads in India, Australia, and Egypt. The vampires who already occupied these regions, primarily Ravnos and Daitya in India, and the Setites in Egypt, faced years of vicious propaganda declaring them to be heathens, savages, and worse. Most people, both kindred and kind, adopted these views wholesale, making the work of controlling popular opinion that much easier for the Ventrue. If a Ventrue wanted to increase profit from a mine in Africa, all they had to do was spread the word that the mine's workers were closet heretics, justifying the decline of pay and living conditions. The Danava of India were able to invoke their historical connection with the Ventrue to leverage themselves into a position resembling neutrality, at least on the surface. After over a century, the native Daitya were able to eventually wrest control of India back from the foreign British Ventrue. Not all Ventrue were robber barons and misanthropes, but enough of them were to make vampiric opinion turn against them for the first time since the founding of the Camarilla. The Tordor were repulsed by the Ventrue obsession with money and political gains. The Tremere had more important things to worry about than who was prince of a small English town. The Gangrel were treated as servants and animals when they were not being hunted down. The Ventrue made just enough compromises to smooth things over, at least with any kindred whom they could make use of. It was during this time that the Ventrue learned to temper their cutthroat business dealings with an outward veneer of philanthropy. They remained, of course, a clan out for profit and prestige, but there's no reason not to remain civil while doing so. This policy was put to the test in the New World, where the Ventrue spread west across North America and provided much of the impetus for doing so. The clan's money could sponsor quite a few land-staking ventures and West Coast mines, and wherever cities sprang up, so did Ventrue interests. The years following the World Wars have seen Clan Ventrue reassert itself once more over a half-century of troubles and decline. The clan thrived during the 4-decade Cold War, taking full advantage of the paranoid on both sides to make massive profits and sink its tendrils into the growing government bureaucracies that came to dominate industrialized governments. Having learned a valuable lesson from the debacle of the Crusades, savvy Ventrue have determined to hold their resources together despite the mortal conflict raging around them. Ventrue on both sides of the Iron Curtain worked in concert, watching their respective governments act against one another for the greatest advantage. The The VENTRUE were particularly fond of the various incarnations of secret police that came into existence, finding them an excellent way to keep the key in line and under supervision. In the West, the VENTRUE concentrated on recovering European industries, all but abandoning the last of their feudal and noble ties for big business and majority shares in multinational corporations. When the Cold War ended, the few former communist bloc VENTRUE, who did manage to cultivate some degree of influence, found themselves stripped of power, just as the government they supported had been. A decade later, these VENTRUE are still trying to recover, while Western VENTRUE-owned companies step into the dismal economies and invest heavily in national infrastructures. As a result, a number of VENTRUE in the East, particularly in Russia, Poland, Bulgaria, and the Ukraine, have turned to organized crime as a new field of influence. The VENTRUE are second only to the Tremere, as I've mentioned before, in terms of organization and interrelation, and, well, taking pride in the fact that every clan member has a place and knows just where he stands within the clan in relation to everyone else. Of course, the system is not at all like some military organization. Acquiring dignitas is the only way to advance in VENTRUE's society. One does not necessarily ascend a ladder advancement from rank to rank. Rather, members can move through the largely honorific system as their abilities and fortunes decree. The VENTRUE feel that this system allows them more flexibility and lets them spot new talents within the clan and reward it if desirable. The clan elders often point this later facet of the system out to the young kindred who are anxious and frustrated at the lackluster success of their own unlives. The system borrows heavily from the Roman Republic's political institutions. Although the democratic elements of that system were stripped away long ago, the overall structure and some of the names remain. The clan is headed by the Ephrit, which arbitrates intra-clan disputes, chooses the representative for the inner circle of the Camarilla, and maintain the unity of the clan in the face of global issues, although only VENTRUE in power positions like princes or primogen are actively inclined to heed them. Other influential figures within the clan are the Strategoi, which enforce the dominance of the Ephrit along geographic regions. As agents of the Strategoi act the Lictors, who often specialize in a, well, specific field, finances, warfare, etc. On a more local scale are the Tribune, which acts as a messenger to VENTRUE in a political position, often to alert him on the directives set by the Ephrits. Inside cities, the VENTRUE organize themselves into an institute called the Goroisha, or simply Board in modern Knights. This council effectively adjudicates VENTRUE concerns within the city, overseeing VENTRUE business and political interests within a domain. The board is officially headed by their praetor, who brings issues before the rest of the board and hosts their meetings. Below the praetors are the Adelas, who said the council and praetor, just as, well, supervisors assist managers in a business. By their turn, the questors act as assistants for the elder, or otherwise experienced VENTRUE. Finally, below the questors lie the common VENTRUE. Without a formal title or useful experience to the clan, they're called Aaron. And now we're going to be moving on to some of the clan variants. And the first one's going to be the El Hiyazi, and they are a distinctive lineage of VENTRUE. Unlike the main body of the clan, who are traditionally associated with the Romans or Christian Europeans, El Hiyazi bloodline claims descent from native Arabian lineages. They have adopted Islam and are accepted as part of the Ashira, but they're also relatively few in number. Nonetheless, they wield considerable political, financial, and even religious power in the Arabian Peninsula. They claim rulership over several Saudi Arabian cities, including the Riyadh. However, they do not have any particular difference from more mainstream VENTRUE that would qualify them as a bloodline. The VENTRUE Anti-Tribute are the knights and paladins of the Sabbath, sworn to combat the antediluvians and, well, bring down the degenerate Camarilla. They see their Camarilla counterparts as failures and have assumed the roles of the race of Cainites saviors to atone for this. They believe mortals to be ignorant cattle, sufficient only for food and service to their terrible vampire lords. To accept anything less is to take the path of the disgraced VENTRUE of the Camarilla, and the Sabbath VENTRUE are not willing to accept that failure. VENTRUE obsession with the purity of their own breeding causes them to find the idea of impure VENTRUE bloodlines displeasing. Under such social pressure, if an offshoot bloodline ever came into existence and managed to survive, it most likely did so by pretending to be nothing other than pure blood VENTRUE. Such is the case within Camarilla territory anyway. Outside of Camarilla territory, it's a different story. The VENTRUE culture places a heavy emphasis on dignitas, the Latin word for dignity. In modern days, it is often described as face. VENTRUE are completely aware of the unsavory aspects of power, and while a VENTRUE leader is just as likely to lead organized crime as he is a Fortune 500 company, the VENTRUE really do not object to theft so much as petty theft. It must always must comport himself with dignity, with grace, and with honor, at least publicly. VENTRUE take assaults on their stature very seriously. Spreading rumors, taking credit for another's work, and insulting a VENTRUE without just cause, publicly or privately, are just a few of the ways one can diminish dignitas. Doing so is a sure way to make an enemy for all on life, and it can indeed be cause for severe punishment or discipline. Perhaps no tradition sets the VENTRUE more apart from other clans than their ethic succor. While other clans, well, such as the Tremere, are closely knit and often support members, no clan has the same no excuses, no exceptions practice of coming to each other's assistance in time of need. Many Blue Bloods credit this tradition as the foundation for the clan's continuing strength. Respecting other VENTRUE means not violating their territory, not competing with them and their established holdings, and, most importantly, not impugning their dignitas. It also means that a VENTRUE gives aid to a fellow when in need, no matter how damned inconvenient doing so might prove to be. As the products of 5 millennia of noble upbringing, class, and culture, the VENTRUE place great importance on gentility. VENTRUE etiquette can become quite complex, especially in Europe where deathless standards persist onto the modern nights. Things are often less formal in the New World, but only by comparison. Even the most casual of old world cities usually seem stodgy and overly polite by modern standards. For the VENTRUE, politeness means nothing more than just carrying on with traditional ways and means. It serves some very important functions, especially when it comes to making sure that individual clan members can overcome their petty personal differences and respect the social structure. By nature, kindred are excitable creatures, prone to holding grudges and overreacting to insults. Add in the average VENTRUE's regard for his dignitas, and politeness becomes not only a matter of manners, but a matter of survival. Interacting with one another in a sophisticated, polite, and admittedly distant manner helps alleviate the threat of flaring tempers. As a clan devoted to proud detail and tradition, the VENTRUE have managed to accumulate a code of conduct large enough to fill several weighty tomes. Not that they ever collected them thus. Suggestions can be, well, found that govern everything from what color clothing to wear at a board meeting to what kind of presents to give at a death night celebration. According to their own oral history and annals, the VENTRUE have embraced only those worthy of honor. Nobles, religious leaders, and great military men have all found their way into Clan VENTRUE over the centuries. The VENTRUE have high standards of admittance into their ultra-exclusive club of undead. Neo-Knights who fail to meet the clan's benchmark find themselves shunned by their blood, well, siblings, left alone and left out of important opportunities, and otherwise disadvantaged. Many would-be sires discuss their, well, potential childer with their elders, often their own sires, before the embrace, thus gauging the new VENTRUE's acceptance into proper society. Even after the embrace, the fledgling has to pass a training regimen, known as the Agoge, in order to be accepted as a full clan member. They must learn the ins and outs of VENTRUE etiquette and traditions quickly, all while learning to master their undead potential and discover their place within the Camarilla and kindred society. The Agoge demands that the sire test his child constantly, quizzing him on facts and challenging his understanding. Many sires prefer Socratic tests as well, teaching their child more as they assimilate previous knowledge. Failure or missteps result in withering insults and even physical pain. When the VENTRUE is deemed acceptable by his sire, he introduces him officially before the prince of the domain and passes the first part of the Agoge. After another period of training, the young VENTRUE is groomed to introduce himself before the board. To prove his worth, the sire poses a challenge to the neonate. The young kindred must go forth on her own and establish a domain of influence within the city without the assistance of any other VENTRUE. If the neonate succeeds, she is taken before the assembled board members of the local VENTRUE. She then gives a full accounting of herself, clan traditions, history, and how she met the final challenge. The ritual then has the assembled clan vote on whether the neonate should be accepted into the clan. In reality, only the dullest sire places a child before the board without first making sure that the Garujia finds her acceptable. The assembled clan then assents to the kindred's acceptance unanimously. Those still strongly opposed may remain silent if they wish. The praetor then asks the neonate a series of ritual questions devised by any VENTRUE who cared to proffer one. In answering them, the neonate also recites her lineage and promises to uphold the traditions of both the clan and the Camarilla. No ancestor is as important in the VENTRUE lineage as the 4th generation Methuselah. Each of the 4th generation's line habitually manifests certain traits, fueling claims they possess blood more potent than other clans. Scholars of the Vitae postulate each Methuselah spawns a new bloodline, but learned VENTRUE refute such speculation. Up to date, 7 lines have been observed that trace themselves back. Finally, due due to their inherent clan weakness, VENTRUE have exacting and rarefied tastes, even when it comes to blood. This tends to restrict exactly who they can drink from and what they can drink from to certain and varying degrees. And that's it, guys. We covered the entire VENTRUE that we went over for this video, and I hope you learned something new. Like I said, I try to make it to where you can learn at least 1 to 3 things new that you didn't know before, and if not, then I hope you at least still enjoyed the video, still got a little bit of a touch up, and well, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you guys did enjoy it, everyone, and maybe possibly deciding to join the Discord optionally to talk to me off stream hours, off recording hours, or just in general, as well as maybe think about joining my Patreon and becoming a Patreon member of any tier, which will also support me in what I do even more. Thank you guys for stopping by, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video once again. I'll catch you guys in the next release.